Hey, Steve Saretsky here. Welcome back to the show. Quite a bit to touch on this week. We've got some update to Canada's population statistics. We've got some update to what's happening in the housing supply chain, what's happening with mortgage rates. There's been some big movements there as we head into the new year, so I want to walk you through all that. But I really have to start this week's video off of touching back on our big theme, right? Our big theme this year has been this excessive population growth that, in my opinion, is ultimately a policy decision, and a policy decision that's gone wrong. Everything that we face today in terms of our housing challenges have ultimately been policy decisions. They've been policy decisions through the central bank, through the federal government, the provincial government, the municipal government. So these are things that all, again, could be changed. So hopefully by at least having this dialogue here today, we can have some more informed people that, again, hopefully can push our policymakers in the right direction. Canada's population growth statistics came out for Q3 here. We had 430,000 people, new people coming into the country, right? So the population grew by 430,000 people in Q3. Again, this is net, right? So we look at births, we look at deaths, and you say, okay, how much larger is our population? Well, it's grown by 430,000 people. That's the largest growth rate since 1957 for any quarter. So we're on pace this year to add 1.3 million people to this country. Now remember, we added over 1 million people last year. So we're going to add about, let's say 1.3, we want to be conservative, let's say 1.2 million people into this country right here, right now, in the midst of what is already a housing crisis. Prices are sky high. Sure, they've come off a little bit over the last year and a half. The rental market remains incredibly tight. Prices, we're going to get into that, but shelter inflation sky high. You got wait times at hospitals, the infrastructure, etc. So ramping up 1 million people a year, you're kind of scratching your head and going, what's the thought process here? I'm struggling to really understand it. Because if we look at this from a housing supply perspective, we're adding 1.3 million people, and we're going to build about 220,000 homes in this country. Okay, so you're going to build about 220,000 homes in this country. Whether you look at housing completions, which is, again, pretty obvious, housing completions, or you look at housing starts, give or take 10, 15, 20,000, you're going to end up basically in the low twos. And so based on all of this, we're massively underbuilding new housing in this country. And this isn't just like a 1 year phenomenon. Again, we had, over 1 million people last year, and we built like 230,000 homes. So the supply demand imbalance is actually getting worse. It's not getting better. And so what I would argue is that this is blatantly obvious excessive immigration that needs to be tamped down. It's completely reckless. And the conversations I've had, I had this, city council here messaging me on Twitter saying, hey, I think your numbers are wrong. The government targets 465,000. I'm going, excuse me, you're the guy that's responsible for approving new housing supply in the city of Vancouver. You don't know your own numbers. The government sets permanent residency targets of, I think it's 465,000. Next year, I think it goes to 500,000. But what's happening is all this growth is actually coming in non-permanent residents. It's people here on work visas, work permits, and they're staying in the country. And so your numbers are off, and I'm saying, my gosh, this is a policymaker that's responsible for approving housing supply and doesn't know his own numbers. I think you can multiply this across various levels of government, because I've had these conversations with these policymakers, and people like myself, Ben Rabideau, I think, who's been flagging it for years and years now, testified in the House of Commons in 2020 or 2021 saying, guys, we've got a problem and nobody's doing anything. And so this problem is going to continue to magnify. It's bad when you've got economists coming out of these large Canadian banks, Scotiabank, BMO, coming out and saying, hey, this is a real problem. What is going on here? So BMO's saying, given the current rate of population growth, Canada requires about 170,000 new homes every single quarter. Again, 170,000 every single quarter. We're currently building 220,000 for the year. And so it's completely broken, and nothing that I can do to really really change it other than hopefully educating people here to ultimately when you come up to vote, you have to change things through the voting process, because I think this is incredibly wrong. What they're doing to the country right now, but nonetheless, this is coming from someone in the real estate market. And it's funny that you get people even in publicly traded REITs, real estate investment trusts, coming out publicly and saying this is a real problem. Our rents are through the roof. We love it, but this is wrong for the country. 1 million plus people a year, because we don't have the ability to really ramp up the housing supply chain. So let's kind of walk through what's happening on the housing supply side, which we've talked about, right? So you've got the government coming out, the federal government now, and saying, hey, look, we're going to start handing money to all these cities, and my gosh, we're going to build all these new homes, and the governments are coming out and starting to relax zoning policy in many of these cities and provinces. But the problem is twofold. Is A, the economics don't work right now, because over the last 3 years, the cost of construction has gone up by more than 50%, and your interest rates have gone up by 500, 600 basis points in many cases of commercial loans, and the numbers simply don't pencil. People don't want to take risk. I mean, as a developer, right, you have typically you have private investors, right? You have limited partners that are investing into your projects, and they demand a certain return. And you have banks that have certain debt servicing requirements in order to give you these loans. And so if you can't meet these several requirements and there's not enough profitability in the project, it cannot get off the ground. And so there was a recent survey done by CMHC that said 90% of new rental housing is no longer financially feasible using traditional bank financing. The only way to make purpose-built rental housing financially feasible is to run it through CMHC's what they call is an MLI Select program, and it's this very generous financing that basically allows you to have 50-year amortizations. And so because you can spread the loan out over such a long period of time, some of these projects are financially feasible. But CMHC goes on to add that in their survey, 30% of developers are responding saying they are going to pause and they are putting projects on the back burner. So 30% of respondents are pausing or delaying projects because they're no longer financially viable. And so again, the government can rezone as much land and start handing municipal governments, large checks. And is the housing supply actually going to ramp up? And again, I'm just saying in the near term, absolutely not. In fact, housing starts are actually declining right now. And so you can see this issue is going to compound. And we actually had the Bank of Canada out this week, right? They're talking about interest rates here in the near future. Maybe we're going to look at interest rate cuts in 2024 and how many are we going to get. And one of the things that's really holding back this whole inflation fight is shelter. It's the rampant population growth that is putting upwards pressure on shelter prices and aka rents. So rental inflation in this country is currently running at 40-year highs. And the shelter component of the CPI basket accounts for 25% of the shelter basket. And so if you've got a 40-year high in the shelter component of the basket, you're forced to basically leave interest rates higher. And so again, you just, in the very near term, no one's denying that we need immigration and we need our population growing, but the question is, what is the right number? And again, 1.2, 1.3 million is just not the right number, because you just can't support it. And again, you really can't support it on the housing supply side. And in fact, what we're seeing, right, is what I talked about. Again, you can talk about the need for more housing, but at the end of the day, the economics trump whatever the government wants the private market, the private sector to do. And so one of the things that we know intuitively is that in general, there is a supply shortage of skilled trades in the construction sector in this country. But yet, even though there is this shortage, we've seen more firings than hirings this year in the construction sector. So there's more people losing their job than actually growing in the sector, even though we know longer term we need more tradespeople coming in because simply there's just not enough work to supply the people with jobs because these projects are being shelved. And there's a good report that was put out by the Bank of Canada just this week, noting that of all the people coming to the country, right? You hear these politicians say, "Oh, we need immigration. We need it because we need people to come and build the homes." But what was the better question is asking of the people that are coming here, how many of them are coming here to build homes? Right? What is the percentage of people entering the labor force that are building homes? And the Bank of Canada notes that about 3%, only 3% of non-permanent residents, 3% of non-permanent residents are actually entering into the construction workforce. This is a very, very small number of the immigrants that are in fact coming into this country. And Canada also has what's known as an immigration pathway that includes qualified construction workers called the Federal Skilled Trades Program. And it accounts for just 0.1% of annual permanent resident emissions. So basically, the program only admitted 455 people in 2022. So the people that are coming here that we desperately need to build homes aren't actually coming to build homes. And so this is the catch-22 that I always get caught up with, this whole, the YIMBY conversation. I'm a guy that is pro-development. I'm pro-free market. I believe that we have a structural imbalance in housing supply in this country. And so I believe that we need to add supply, but I am realistic about the ability to ramp up supply. So the question is really, if we're building on average about 220,000 homes a year, what can we realistically get that number to? What can we realistically get it to? And I don't know, but is it 260? Is it 280? Is it 320? Is it 340? Because even at 340, which I think I mean that's pretty high, you can't support 1 million people a year coming into the country. So something has to change. Something has to change because this is going to eviscerate the middle class in 10 years' time. If you keep up this pace for the rest of the decade, by 2030, there's you ain't gonna have a middle class, and I can say that quite confidently. This is a total policy error. I think it's incredibly disgraceful, but nonetheless, that's where we stand heading into 2024. And so what we have now, right? And so there's the argument that says, well, population growth, and I agree, population growth will pull back when there's no jobs for these people, which I think is starting to happen. It's starting to happen, right? We're seeing in the labor force job numbers, you're seeing that not enough jobs are being created for the number of people that are coming into the country. So eventually, when there's no jobs and there's not enough economic opportunity, naturally, you should see a pullback in the number of non-permanent residents coming into the country. However, even if you get that number down, so what? You go from 1.2 million people down to 800,000, 600,000? Even at 400,000, I would still say we're going to have a problem. And so this is the real structural imbalance in the housing market that I just think governments are going to really struggle to fix over the next few years. This is a decade-plus problem that is going to have to be resolved, and it's not going to be resolved quickly. So as we shape up into the markets, on the more positive side, if you're coming up for a mortgage renewal in the next year or so in 2024, we're seeing the mortgage rates coming back down. Of course, there was some big movement in the bond market. Right now, based on my contacts here, you're seeing mortgage rates back in the low fives. Again, you will see them in the fours in the new year. I can pretty much guarantee that. Here's what I'll say. If you're mortgage shopping right now, if you don't have a quote under 5.3, you should really pick up the phone and start picking, and start asking around, because that's where the rates are going. That's where our contacts in the industry have them, is sub 5.3 is the number here. So again, if I'm can provide you any value here, I would encourage you to shop around, because the banks are adjusting after the significant decline in bond yields over the last several weeks. As always, hope that helped. I want to wish everybody here a Merry Christmas that's watching this video. I appreciate your support. Throughout the year, we got a lot of big things that are going to come onto this channel here in 2024. Looking to continue to ramp things up, continue to grow, and couldn't be possible without your support, of course. So we'll see you soon.